Dragon Con. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Caro, the BritTrack director, and I'm super excited to talk about women in Doctor Who with these lovely, beautiful people. And I have with me today Trisha Wooldridge. Trisha Wooldridge is a writer, editor, and poet who used to work in the largest online distributor of Doctor Who merchandise in the Northeast. Find out more at her website, which is anovelfriend.com. Hi, Trisha. How are you today?
Hi, Caro. Hi, DragonCon. I'm doing great, and I'm super excited to talk about the women of Doctor Who today.
Awesome. We also have with us Rob Levy. Rob Levy is from needcoffee.com. He's a contributor also to several Doctor Who books. How are you, Rob?
Hello. How are you?
Doing well. I'm excited. This is going to be a great panel.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Sue with us, and Sue Kisenwether is a co-host of Women at Warp, a feminist Star Trek podcast on the Roddenberry Podcast Network. Find out more at womenatwarp.com. Hi, Sue. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are everybody else?
Doing pretty well. Doing awesome. I also have with me the fabulous Janne McKamey, who is the director of the DragCon store. How are you, Janne?
Hi, I'm doing awesome, and I'm glad to be here for another panel.
I know, and I love everyone's shirts, but I specifically love your shirt.
Thank you.
On it. I also have with me the amazing Tony Gowell. He works for DragonCon, and we're really excited. He's also a frequent moderator of various panels. And you may have seen him on the brunch chats and other various things with DragonCon. So, hey, Tony, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Super excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite shows that's ever existed, Doctor Who, and more importantly, the women of Doctor Who, because I really think that's what's driving the narrative of today's conversation and many of our viewers when they watch the show. Lots of controversial choices that the show has made over the years. I'm sporting my Bad Wolf button in support of my personal favorite companion. But this was a trinket that I picked up in the vendor hall a couple of years ago from my friend Rebecca, who runs the Paper Bones store. So hopefully when fans are watching this panel over our DragonCon Goes Virtual weekend, they'll make a point to shop in the Event Any virtual marketplace, a one-stop shop of hundreds of our vendors and artists. So we certainly won't be leaving them behind, even though we're not meeting in person this year.
Yeah,
so thanks for having me.
About the virtual vendor hall.
Yay, I know. That's awesome.
My wallet's not happy, but I am.
Yeah, you're a pro, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's get right into it. We're talking about women in Doctor Who, and I have one kind of challenging question to think about and answer to start things off, which is, how does the role of women in Doctor Who make you personally feel? And let's start off with Sue, and then we'll work our way around.
Perfect.
Oh, target.
And go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whenever you have a franchise that has this kind of longevity, things obviously change over 50 plus years. And there's that car horn again. Hi, everybody. I'm in New York. That's going to happen.
They're trying to get to the bodega.
Probably. But, so I think that women both on screen and behind the scenes are super influential and sort of a driving force behind Doctor Who. We have Verity Lambert, who was the first producer who fought for the show and fought for what her vision of this show was, which has persisted throughout. We have Delia Derbyshire, who wrote the iconic theme. On screen, your companions often, but not always, are young women. And our companion is our audience insert character. So often young women have been the stand-in for the audience watching the show. Now we see, when we got to Sarah Jane, we had a companion that had a journalistic job, and we've seen the roles of the companions in their real lives change over the years. Now we have the Doctor as a woman. And it's been interesting to see how it all changes and how the companions and even the doctors reflect on how the world in which the show is being made has also changed around it over the last five and a half decades. So I'll stop now before I take all of the answers.
Yeah, because I was going to talk about Delia, but that's all right.
I just said a sentence.
It's a rich
Right?
question.
That was a great.
Rich question. Awesome. So, Levy, what do you think? How do you feel about
So, kind of piggybacking what she said about Verity Lambert and Delia Derbyshire, the show was more or less created by a woman, but almost every familiar sound that we know, from the sound of the TARDIS to the theme sound to some of the sounds of like the Daleks moving, that's all created by Delia Derbyshire. And having talked to some of the people that scored the music in the 60s and the effects, that the thing we don't really realize is that a lot more of the sound and textures of that show are actually her than we can attribute to her. So I think that from the start, the show is richer and deeper in that legacy than the casual fan may understand. I mean, it's significant. I also love the fact that every single Doctor has had a very strong and powerful female character who has challenged him, who has been articulate, who has been intelligent, but also has been true to their spirit of, you know, incorporating a way for the listener to come along on the adventure. So I think that's something not every show can do, because it is very hard to write those kind of characters consistently for as long as the show has. And I think that it's part of its lineage and part of its overall legacy. It's just the way that it's written. Interesting characters that are women and not repeating a lot of the dynamics of them. And I think that's really good too. And recently, I'm really glad we're seeing women of color. For me, that's been great.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's go to Trisha next. And what do you think about it? How does it make you feel?
It has, similar to what Sue said, got almost 60 years of different varying influences of how much women are involved behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. And it's fascinating because so last year I did a full rewatch of as much as I possibly could, because they had just made a whole bunch more available. Excuse me. And seeing how the roles of women varied, like you don't get, none of the companions are the same. And we're talking almost 60 years now. None of the companions are the same. Not all of them are characters that I've loved. There's been quite a few that I disliked. But in all of them, they felt very real. They felt like they were believable, three-dimensional characters that I disliked.
Okay, that's a great
And I think that means a lot because I can relate.
Awesome. I like that. Okay, Janne, what do you think?
Glad you didn't save me for last. Geesh. Because going after Tony is like the death. Because he's so knowledgeable. But I think that I've been really impressed. I know I said numerous times that once I started with the Eccleston era, I went back to watch everything from the beginning. And at first, it was just amazing to me that the first producer was Verity Lambert, because she had such a vision. I want to mention Julie Gardner, because she was responsible mainly for the reboot. And she's produced, I think, the second most number of episodes of Doctor Who since its inception. So the fact that they brought in a woman of color to be a producer kind of showed me the direction that the show was eventually going to take. Because that was a big role for her to step into. Those were some big shoes that they trusted her to fill. And the fact that the characters, especially the female characters, are often the conscience of the Doctor means a lot to me, because sometimes he's so outside of himself with what he thinks is right or wrong from his perspective that he needs that human perspective. And I think they always are available to bring him that human perspective.
That's a completely valid point. We're going to dig into that a little bit more a little later. So thank you for mentioning that. Tony, what do you think?
Well, what has always excited me about the Doctor Who series, as far as the way that women are portrayed, really makes me happy because, make no mistake, they are romanticized often, where they have like their little puppy crushes on the doctor, or vice versa. Sometimes the doctor has like kind of a weird misunderstanding of feelings and emotions that maybe they've not sifted through for their companion, but they've never been sexualized.
Exactly.
The doctor never speaks down to them in a way that trivializes them because they're women. The doctor treats them as equals. Sometimes the doctor gets very frustrated because of the misunderstanding of whatever the communication is going on, saying, why aren't you 3 steps ahead like me? But it's never because they're a woman, like, oh, you can't keep up. And that's one of the things that has drawn to me for a show that has the longevity of 57 years now? Are we like right at 57 years? I can't think of an episode where I really felt that women were marginalized as lesser than, not as important as, some kind of sexual creature to be like fawned over, or in any type of salacious way. And that to me is an inspiration that, sometimes we do like to be seen as something that is desirable, but there's a time and place for that. And these adventures show us that it's never about a sleazy nightclub and they have to play these roles. So that's an important thing. And it's what makes me happy about the way that women are portrayed in the show.
And to that point, the writing in the show, as well as the producers, which we've mentioned some, have been some of the strongest, influences in the way that writers choose to portray women, or women write women, as well as producers, structure the role, as you've mentioned. Let's start off with Janne. And what do you think about this idea of the way in which writers and producers have actively chosen to portray women within the show, or even their role in it as women?
I like the fact that all the women had their own lives prior to the doctor, and most of them had their own life after the doctor. They had other things that were important to them besides just traveling with him. Like, Martha eventually wanted to go out on her own. I think Clara wanted to save the doctor, but she knew she didn't have to stay with him in order to do that. Donna, she loved her family, and she would have, destroyed the universe if she thought that it would help her family, who she always, I think, held above the doctor.
That's a good point.
So I'm just excited to see that they weren't so wrapped up in going on adventures with him that they didn't have time to step out into their own lives or their own personality, at least some of the time during their traveling with him.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. Rob, what do you think about the writers and producers?
I think that it almost depends on every single era of it. I mean, the one nice thing about the new era of the show is that we're finally getting female voices writing for the show. And looking at the classic series, with the exception of, Barbara Clegg and then one person writing for the McCoy era, we haven't had that many female writers for the show, which is weird because the way it was created, the way it was birthed. So the fact that we have more people doing that, I think is an improvement. But you can tell, even in a lot of these stories, like particularly the Davison era, when 2 of the 3 companions traveling with them are women, you can tell that they really needed a female voice to write for those characters. Because I think Nissa, for example, is a character that would be much better written with a female writer handling her. And I think Sarah Jane could have even been better with a stronger female writer. So I think that's the biggest aspect of it, is the writing. Having said that, though, a lot of the classic era shows did a pretty good job of making it at least believable and respectful. It could have been better. It could have been a lot more richer and deeper and better, but it wasn't like as blatantly overtly offensive as some of the episodes of like Buck Rogers you watch, or some of the stuff from the 70s. So in general, I think that they've made a lot of progress in trying to get other voices writing the show and producing it and directing it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a good point. Trisha, what do you think?
I'm going to answer that based on something that Tony said that made me think. So my 2 companions are Amy Pond, and Perry. And those, to me, were also the most, not necessarily sexualized, but had the sexiest draw to them. And yet, none of the plots that I saw, that I remember seeing, had anything to do with necessarily them being sexy. So, like, even Amy Pond, who, like, worked as that never mattered to the plot. And Perry, being who she was, never mattered to the plot. She still had to think her way out of things in a lot of cases, and she didn't always get rescued. She had to do it herself, and that was something I think that, even though as I didn't like the characters, I still appreciated that part of the writing that went into them, is that the sexiness of the characters not affect the plot. It was not a plot point. Sexiness was not a plot point, even for the characters that had a large amount of sex appeal.
Okay, all right, that's pretty interesting. Sue, what do you think?
I feel like I fall somewhere in the middle of a lot of stuff that has just been said. I agree very much with Rob that a lot of you can see the eras in the producer or showrunner. You can sort of see their show running philosophy, and it's very easy to distinguish. But anybody who's seen me on Doctor Who panels before will know that I am not personally a big fan of the Moffat era. And when you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, that's when you see he hired Karen Gillan because he liked her legs. Period. That's why he hired her. So even if her stories didn't have to do with her sex appeal, that's why she was there, because Stephen Moffat thought she was hot, right? And the times that we do see the Doctor talking down to his companion, I mean, the most striking for me recently was in 12 speaking to Clara. He knocked her down a whole bunch. Was it because she was a woman? No, but that dynamic is still there. So, I mean, it's those things, even if they're not overt, right? If it's not because of your gender, they're still part of that era. And, as we have more recent shows that are more modern, we know more behind the scenes stuff. So I think we judge them sometimes more harshly, and I am included in that. But we can see how things have changed. We can see how different producers or showrunners react to different situations. And anyway, I just hope for continued improvement in the current era. And I think this was Rob's point as well, when you have more voices from different backgrounds, from different genders, from different races, from different sexualities in a writer's room, on a creative team, then you will have somebody there who says, maybe that's not the best look. Even if your intention is not to do harm, maybe you shouldn't do that because it might still do some harm.
That's I really like that. I really like, very well said. Tony, what do you think?
In the conversations that we've been having and answering the question, it takes me back to the stock stereotypes that we see in another favored Brit show, Are You Being Served? You have the flamboyant gay character. You have Mrs. Slocum with all of her double entendres with her cat, and the super sexualized assistant. And I admire that Doctor Who began its journey as a children's television show. Like, its intent was to be educational. And that's why a lot of those early stories were about historical pieces in time to kind of enrich the learning experience. And then as the show evolved, like, you're right. Well before Dragon Con brought me on as an employee back in 2012 full-time, I was a casting director for Warner Brothers. And I could tell you some stories that would make your hair stand on end with what it's like in Hollywood. It's very misogynistic. Any woman that has gotten a place in film and television, I assure you, she fought her way there. It was not handed to her because she was at the right place at the right time. She worked her way up. She earned her spot. So I do admire the evolution of technology where it's much more difficult to have those behind the scenes secrets. Like those secrets are coming out, like, you know, all cockroaches will eventually be seen in the light. And that is very true in film and television. So in going back to the first question, what made me happy is that I never saw the women in the show being overly sexualized. And I agree with what you were saying, Sue, is that I feel that Capaldi's version of the Doctor kind of talked down to Clara at times, but I didn't know if it was because of age, not necessarily gender, but that could certainly be read. And like your interpretation of how it's perceived is definitely valid. But coming from the film and television background that I have, man, there's a lot of ugly that happens behind the scenes, and it doesn't surprise me at all that Karen was hired because she has amazing legs. It doesn't surprise me in the least, and that's just the way that system works. Sometimes it's ugly, but the end product that we get as fans is amazing. And as humans make people be better humans, then we get the rewards from that. And so I love seeing people of color, people of different genders and sexualities being represented in mainstream media. So yeah, to build on what everybody says, you know, like these are all valid opinions to have, and that's why we come together to have these conversations.
And we see that with the companions, right? We see that in the way that they fit into the show. Yeah. So what do we think about that? Anybody want to start off?
Well, if I may, like I was super excited to see a different companion beyond Rose. Billie Piper to me is one of the most beautiful women in the world, an amazing actor in her own right. And I loved her as the companion, absolutely loved her. But I was excited to see what the next companion would be. And it was really strange to me is that with Martha, she was like a doctor, but acted like Billie's interpretation of Rose. Like it was very strange. So beyond the Rose to Martha, you saw a better evolution of the types of personalities that the companions built. So I don't know if there were some behind the scenes things, because I think Martha got really the short end of the stick as far as the companion. Like they didn't know how to write her character well until she came back in some of those special episodes where multiple companions were brought in. Then I felt that she was a little bit fiercer and more interesting and dynamic. So I don't know what maybe the writing struggles might have been at the time, but I was glad to see that they were like, okay, let's not be so formulaic with our companions in this new reboot of the series. Let's start diversifying with Donna and the Ponds and that kind of thing.
I think Martha finally started coming into her own writer-wise as a companion when the Master came back and took over the Earth, and she was traveling everywhere, telling the story of the Doctor. I think that's when she finally came into her own as a companion outside of Rose's shadow, and it took a long time for her to get there.
I think when they decided to make part of her character a lovesick puppy for the Doctor.
Yeah, that was so strange.
That's when they did her the disservice, and they needed to break her out of that in order to give her her own character. She should not be, none of the companions should be defined in what they are to the Doctor, right? And that's what they did with Martha for far too long. And the best thing she ever did, I mean, her story of like the woman who walked the earth is a great one, but the best thing that Martha ever did is say, you know what, I'm out.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think with Martha, though, up until Human Nature, most of her stories were stories that were already written for Rose. And they did not take the time when they cast the new companion. I mean, they had scripts done far in advance, but someone should have went through and probably did. Now, because they have budgets and time constraints, they probably couldn't. But they should have done a bit of an edit about how
to de-rose her.
That makes more sense.
That makes sense.
It's not till Human Nature you really see her. And when I had her panel, I don't know if she mentioned this at your panel, Tony, but when she had her panel, she mentioned that with Human Nature, there were certain aspects to that character being in that point of time, that period of time, that she wanted put in and she wanted addressed.
Oh, that's so great. No, my panel with her was about Sense8. So Freeman was amazing, and I would love her to come back to Dragon Con.
I
sad that I missed the Doctor Who panel.
I wanted more of her and I wanted her belt better written. And I think you guys are right with the whole, you know, and the fact that she wasn't a doctor, they didn't really flesh that out, you know, in the same
that
way.
was so strange.
In the same way they sort of did that with Liz Shaw in the Pertwee era. They just sort of, you know, I think that they are like, oh, she's a doctor, but then they kind of toned it down. So I think
can't make her too smart.
No, but well, I think you could, but you know, I think if you wrote it well, you could seriously do it. I mean, come on.
I mean, they played on her being a doctor well when they brought her into Torchwood to those episodes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think that that particular era, they didn't really write well for any companion until they really got to Catherine Tate, because Catherine Tate was just like, this is how I'm doing it. I'm sorry, you know.
Such a refreshing take on a companion.
But I think it is interesting to see how the companions sort of go. I mean, a lot of the times, many of the way that Capaldi's doctor talked to his companions is very similar to the way Pertwee, it mimics how Pertwee talked to his companions. There's a lot of how Pertwee treats Joe Grant in how Capaldi's doctor talks to Clara. There's a lot of that, you know, and then there's the, oh, you know, you'll get it. And then later when he realizes she gets it, then it's the lights go on. And that really drives me nuts. That's the one thing about the Pertwee era that drives me absolutely nuts. It's sort of that early relationship with Joe until they flash that out. And I think they could have really, in some of those early years, toned down the romance and with Rose and sort of leveled her out on a more intellectual level to pave the way for the other companions. I wish they would have done that, but obviously, you know, they're not thinking that far ahead when they're writing a script due next week.
Right.
Yeah. Trisha, what do you think?
So we've gone all over the place. So I was trying to think of the original questions on companions. One, because there was, so we'll go to Catherine Tate. One of the things, particularly with Catherine Tate's character, where I think, especially with what Rob was saying with Rose, is that you have a much more of an every person in that character. She has like just like your average on most cases, and that is kind of what I really liked about her. And I think they started off with Rose like that, you know, shop worker, slightly lower class, but then she became a superhero. And Donna's story, Donna was sadly never going to be a superhero, but at the same time, for storytelling purposes, it was much, I think a much story. Not only did she play the conscience for the Doctor on multiple times, the Doctor also could still educate her about things that humans don't realize about our own culture, like about how clothing's made and things like that. So it was a much fairer exchange of information based on these two characters, clearly from very different levels of experience and very different levels of culture. In some of the older ones, you also saw that. I think the very, very early Hartwell ones, when we had Susan and the two teachers, we got to see that too, where the Doctor could tell them, well, no, that's a misconception you have about your own people. But they also had a chance to explain to him, you know, different, like when he nearly killed the cave person, and they had this discussion about and morals. So when you have the companions that have that even exchange, I think that's when you get a richer story. Because yes, the Doctor's, you know, between hundreds to thousands of years old. So yes, there's a lot he knows, but the fact he still has things to learn is what makes the Doctor relatable.
Yeah. And then, you know, we have other characters, you know, we have Alex Kingston, and we have that dynamic on, and even in the classic series, we have all these different variants of types of women, right? We've got age differences, we've got, you know, just the way they portray themselves. They're either really scientifically inclined, like Liz Shaw, you know, and then you've got Bonnie Langford, you know, you've got her character in the classic series, as well as the TARDIS, right, showing up. as a woman.
Yeah.
As a woman, yeah.
There's such a range and breadth of the kinds of women that are represented, even from, you know, early on, with the stark difference between the very first two female companions with Susan and Barbara, right? Older teacher. And you have this Susan, who is my least favorite female companion, to be frank, mostly because she faints, she screams a lot, she always stuck in whatever situation that she can't get herself out of, and someone has to come get her, and was extremely frustrating to watch. But, you know, again, this is a show that's 57 years old.
Right.
What do we think about that? Think about how time has influenced the portrayal of women on the show in the history of it.
Well, I think that whenever we look forward to finding clues about the next series that's coming out, one of the things that is in my top 3 of what I hope is, will we see River Song? And I think that is a same placement on a list whenever we hear about pieces from an upcoming series, is some of these strong female characters that we've had drop in and out over the years that we look forward to seeing again. And that's a testament to how well written these women are and how well acted these characters are. What was the name of the Edwardian ladies, the lizard woman that was 10,000 years old?
The detectives.
Yeah, the detectives. Like, I was like, genius, how wonderful. Oh, and this is my wife. Like, it was this casual thing that didn't need to be really discussed, and everybody just accepted it with face value. So, I mean, if I see a hint that those characters get to come back, that makes me excited as well. So, you know, that's a testament. I think really, like, the Captain Jack Harkness character is the only male character that people have on the top of their list next to, like, a Dalek or any type of villain character. But yeah, it's always the women that we look forward to seeing when the show comes back.
Yeah. When Missy arrived for the longest time, I was really hoping that would be another incarnation of the Ronnie.
Me too.
Because we hadn't seen. I mean, I loved what they did, and I loved Michelle Gomez's character. It was awesome.
So brilliant.
But I was looking forward to seeing the Ronnie come back.
Right. That was a strong rumor. Yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't. The price the Bakers wanted for the Ronnie character to come back, it was easier just to rewrite. And then they literally thought of, hey, wait a minute, we can do something completely different with it. What's interesting about the Ronnie and her 2 stories that we get on TV is that she is so clearly and blatantly obvious in Mark of the Ronnie, superior to the Master. And they let it, I mean, it's one of those few times in the 80s where it's like, the male is in a subjective role. The Master is clearly out of his element in the Ronnie, and it's awesome. And there are times, you know, the Doctor even admits clearly she's so brilliant. She might even be more brilliant than me. And there are times in that episode where, you know, the Doctor never relents in treating her as an equal, which for the show at that particular time was pretty incredible, right? Because outside of Chancellor Flavia, we hadn't seen a female Time Lord that was like gutsy, right? And I think that the way the Ronnie came in was awesome. When they brought her back in the McCoy era, because it was the first episode with McCoy, a lot of it, and they had to bring in Bonnie and a lot of the other stuff that was going in, it kind of got washed down a little bit. But I really think that the Ronnie as a character, and the audios with her for Big Finish are great. But the Ronnie really is it's sort of a missed opportunity. And we haven't had, except for, you know, like Evelyn Faye, we haven't had a lot of female villains in the show until that. And that's what I would love to have, is more of that. Because it was so refreshing, it was so new. And you don't look at it, if it's done well, you know, I'm not looking at the gender politics of it. I'm looking at the Ronnie's awesome. I'm not thinking about if she's a man or a woman, you know? And that's how you know it works.
You're not, but the creators were.
Exactly.
And I mean, you hit the nail on the head.
I know. Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head with she was smarter than the Master. She was brilliant, but that's because she was a character archetype at the time that was allowed to be,
Yeah.
right? The only women, not only, but most of the women who were allowed to be brilliant were also villains.
Yeah.
In the 80s and before. But I'm gonna hijack it and steer back to Caro's question.
No, good.
of how it's changed over times. And I think that so TV that we make, characters we create, reflect the time that they are created in, right? And that is a discussion that like I have all the time because I do a Star Trek podcast, right? There's 53 years of that show. There's 57 years of this franchise. And I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is like whenever you do a critique of an older property, the comments that come in are, you have to understand the context. You have to understand the historical aspect. You have to understand what was going on at the time. Yes, that's true. It does add context. It does add explanation, but that's not an excuse.
It doesn't make it right. You're absolutely correct.
It doesn't make it right. And the thing is, it might have been created in the 60s or 70s or 80s or even 90s, right? But we're watching it today and we're interpreting it today. So we're going to critique it by today's standards. We can say, you know, this thing that we're seeing as problematic now was progressive then, but here's why it's problematic now. And again, we're not saying that the creators had a poor intent or that they meant to cause harm, but just that as we're watching it and as we're interpreting it by today's standards, we have to understand that, yes, things have changed. And that's the big thing in media criticism, especially when you're dealing with older media, is that you have to be aware of that and you have to take that into account, that something that could be groundbreaking is now not necessarily something you might want to have to explain to your kids sometimes.
Right. Oh, but Sue, to your point about Star Trek, shout out to Lucille Ball for making Star Trek happen.
My girl, my homie.
It's the power of women, man, that makes these things happen.
She did it 3 times. Anyway.
Right?
So I didn't mean to digress, but I was like, oh, speaking of something historical, you know, someone like Lucille Ball helped make Star Trek a reality. And look where we are all these years later. They're about to launch 2 more series in the year 2021. So the cartoon, I think, comes out later this year, but the other series comes out next year. So I think that's incredible.
If I can take 30 seconds, like we know that a lot of people know about the letter writing campaign to save Star Trek in its 3rd season, but in its 2nd season, this was the 3rd and final time that Lucille Ball saved Star Trek. The show was losing so much money that she was either going to have to cancel the show or sell Desilu Studios. And she decided to sell her studio rather than cancel Star Trek.
Wow.
So anyway.
Back to Doctor Who.
Back to Doctor Who.
But I mean, it's all very relevant because when you really dig deep and you think about it, right, you have these producers, and especially with the new series, right, we have these amazing people who are fighting, and they are women, for this show and for good quality television and trying to get the portrayal of women in a new light that we haven't really seen before. We have Jodie Whittaker, right? We have Doctor. It has had 12 incarnations up to this point that have all been, white men. And now we have a woman, and now we have Ruth, right? We have Ruth revealed as well. And it's very powerful when you have a show that it has been around for 57 years and has been historically in this vein. And now we're kicking the door open and we have so much more going on with it. So let's get into it. Let's chit chat about Jodie Whittaker and all the things that go with it as far as the new series is concerned. So there might be some spoilers if you haven't seen the most 2 recent series. Here's your warning for spoilers. But we're gonna chit out the remainder of our panel chit-chatting about this. So what do we want to talk about first? We want to talk about the producers. We want to talk about Jodie. mention whatever you want. This is a free for all. Let's start off with Janne.
I like the way that they're two entirely different personalities. It's like Ruth is the doctor she could have become, or any of the males could have become without the companions that they had for guidance. It's almost like she was a type of rebel that was out to cleanse the world no matter what, without any concern for humanity. And you kind of see a reflection of that. I don't remember the episode title, but it's with Matt Smith and Toby, where he sees the reflection.
Okay.
Do you guys know which episode I'm talking about?
Is that the Venice one? Is that the Venice one? No.
No, it's not the Venice one. It's the one
Okay.
where there's something going on with him and Amy and Rory, and she's the girl that waited. And then there's almost like a subconscious him where he sees his reflection towards the end of that storyline, where it's like it's the doctor he could have become, being ruthless and unemotional, where humanity and his companions are concerned. That seems to me the end of this last series with Jodie and Ruth as the doctors, that it's almost like a split personality.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's taking the blame for what her alter ego did. And I find that to be very intriguing, because I want to see in the next series how it got to that point where the Ruth doctor felt like she had to be that ruthless, for lack of a better word. So willing to kill people.
Mm.
The doctor has a voice.
You just like connect. Oh, sorry.
You're good.
You just connected an issue that I'd had in my head about Jodie, because there were multiple times in the last two seasons where Jodie felt almost uncharacteristically ruthless, where she was willing to kill, willing to punch and hurt, which I felt was very out of character for the. So based on what you just brought up, Janne, I wonder, that makes a lot of sense and actually kind of fits that in, if the route of being more ruthless and less compassionate was one she could have taken with her regeneration. So that actually kind of settles a little issue that's been bothering me in my head, because it felt disingenuous some of the times where she was not thinking as compassionately as the doctor normally would. And that felt to me like there was, in what I had originally interpreted as, was that they were trying to make a female doctor not act female and embrace more of like a brutalistic thing, but then it would come back and she would be not as decisive. And two of those issues just felt very disharmonious. That's probably not a word, but that's what it felt to me in watching Jodie's character, and kind of what frustrated me about it, because it didn't seem as
natural.
It seemed there was parts of Doctor that were not being carried through. But now that you're making me think of it, if that's a way that she could have gone, that actually does make more sense.
I really appreciate that. Sue, what do you think?
I didn't get that at all from Jodie's doctor. Wow. It just goes to show you how different people get different things from their shows, right? I really enjoyed Jodie's doctor from the very start. And one of the things I love the most about her is that even as she is encountering new things and figuring out who she is and what her personality is, her initial reaction to a new situation is, I'm good at this, I think, right? So even if she's not sure, even if she's never done it before, her attitude going into a new situation is, I can do this, I'm good at this. And I think that's very different from a lot of the self-doubt that we often see in women characters. And I appreciated that a lot. I loved that, you know, she didn't have her TARDIS, she didn't have a Sonic, so she made one because she could. And I liked her quite a bit. I know there's a lot of discourse around it, but like I'm on board for 13.
Okay, Rob?
I you know, with what Trish said, that's an interesting perspective, and piggybacking on you, Sue. I saw that as sort of an aspect of like maybe Colin Baker's Doctor coming into her performance, but I never thought that, and I thought that was interesting that you brought that up. I think the thing that's interesting about Jodie, I mean, I agree with you. I'm completely on board. It's fine. I mean, we've talked about at other panels about the writing, so we're not going to jump on that. But I love the fact that even some of the incidental characters, like the character I really loved last season was in Can You Hear Me? They go to Aleppo, and they meet this incredible Syrian woman, and that was amazing. You know she's not going to be a companion. You know that she's not probably going to be a recurring character, but it's just this sidebar character that's like really well written and really well developed and really awesome. And then you get, you know, going back to the season before in the Rosa Parks story, you get the same thing. These really great female side characters that are great. You also get it in the Punjab story as well. So I think that they're really onto something, that they're bringing in side characters. Even Praxis has really incredibly great female, you know, guest characters, you know. And I think that they not only have incredibly strong companions that are well written to coincide with a female Doctor, they also have really well written guest star characters.
Right.
So I think that they are making a very cognizant effort across the board to make all of their characters, regardless of gender, really well fleshed out as much as they can in 45 minutes. And they're putting a lot more care into how these roles are viewed and interpreted and presented in Jodie's era than they may have before. And I love that. And I think that when you look at Jodie, 2 seasons I don't think is really enough to really judge her. I mean, fans can love it and say, oh my God, she's great, it's awesome. But I don't think you can be a critic and really necessarily judge it, because this is a whole new vision of the show that's being fleshed out.
Right.
And you know, these people are like, I don't want to go with it. Well, don't go with it. That's fine. Move on. But I love not knowing where it's going. And I love seeing something different despite all the familiarity. I love seeing something that different and that bold. And I will bitch about the scripts, you know, until I turn blue. But at the end of the day, they are going out on ledges that the show never used to go on. And that is exciting. So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, Tony?
My only concern, and it's merely a concern because we don't know what's coming. We can't scry into the future to see how different versions of the Doctor are going to come about. But I think it's very important that we keep this momentum of putting minorities, people of color, women in these writer roles, because we're eventually going to keep analyzing the performance of the Doctor as we get new Doctors, because there are only so many different ways that you can portray and act personality types without going, oh, she's being like Matt Smith. Oh, she's being like David Tennant. Oh, you get that in a parallel. American audiences love to fight over the different versions of the Joker that keep coming out in the Batman series. So I'm afraid that, you know, as we continue with series and as we continue with regenerations, we're going to see more scrutiny on how these women bring themselves into the role of the Doctor. Because you can't help but as a viewer going, oh, I see her zaniness is kind of like David Tennant. And I see like, oh, her intellectual serious thinking is more like Capaldi. And so I'm looking forward to the comparisons being to other women. That will be amazing. So those are things that I'm hoping will challenge us as viewers, is that we will continue to see evolutions of the companions and the diversity to be there, and that it's represented but not necessarily focused on. You know what I mean? Like, I love that it just exists. Great. Because I know lots of people from different backgrounds, and they just exist, and they're a part of my life because I adore being around them. And that's what I hope that these writers can create, is that we want fans that are watching this to enjoy being around these characters. It doesn't matter who they're sleeping with. It doesn't matter what religious background they have or what their careers were before they went on this incredible journey with the Doctor. So that's what I'm hoping for women moving forward, is that we keep grinding and we keep making it stronger and better and relatable.
Oh no, I completely agree with you. I am super excited about Jodie, and
I love her.
I adore her. I mean, I just recently rewatched both her series to just kind of like re-examine it, because I feel like the second time around you kind of get a chance to really look at it, and when you're watching something, and you know, there's a lot of these really neat side characters that show up in episodes that I'm like, ooh, this person could be a companion. Like, oh, pick her. Like, she's really neat. Like,
let her get in the TARDIS. Let's go.
Yeah.
right. And
Go away.
I don't remember the name of the episode, but the Pating episode where they're on the space hospital ship. It's
Oh yeah.
conundrum. And the general, I was like, this general is the female brigadier. Like, she's the female brigadier in so many ways. And I thought she was fantastic, and I loved the actress. And I just thought, like, pick her, like, take her with you. Like, I got really excited. And just the way that she would play off of, you know, different people that she took with her, especially, I can't remember their name, the radio operator and the scientist, the Victorian scientist, that she picks up to help her defeat the
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And
oh yeah.
And that's an example of the Doctor encouraging her to be fiercely independent and to be the strong, smart woman that she is in a time when that wasn't really a place that women showcased their imagination and their education and their intelligence.
Yeah, and it was so cool to get to see more of that, and it just across the board, you know, with her. And the way that Jodie, I think, is very unique in we're seeing a way in which the Doctor is being portrayed in an interesting light. I really enjoy. I know the Doctors always kind of talk to themselves, but I really find it interesting that this is a big cornerstone of the Jodie incarnation of the Doctor, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. When she turns and she's, you know, she's literally in another dimension.
I agree with
and
you on that.
One thing I just hope for.
Yeah, that's actually some of my favorite parts, is when she is talking with herself, because you get more insight to what she's thinking. And even more so, you get to, because we do that so often, it made her more relatable to me, because I'm always arguing with myself, especially in The Timeless Child, when I'll tell a voice in my head, no, shut up. And I'm like, yeah, but then, and that I did really love about her character, is that constant self-assessment, which I did like, because she was trying to evaluate herself and making sure she understood who she was in that moment.
Yeah. Sue, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, just one thing that I really hope for as the show continues, if she sticks around, I want to see more for Yaz. Not even more from Yaz, but more for her, because that's the one character right now who, to me, is just, like, I hate to say it, but kind of an empty shell. Right? She's just there, and she's there for whatever they need her to be there for. She doesn't have a lot of her own agency, and she doesn't have a lot of her own personality. And that's
almost sad her family has more personality than she does.
Yeah. So that's the one thing that I'm really hoping for.
I think they're getting there. I think they put those seeds in last year for a reason. I'm hoping. Anyway, I'm hoping. But you're right.
Yeah. To build on what you were saying, Rob, in the future, what do we know? I mean, I saw Jodie's amazing PSA in this time of COVID, which brought tears to my eyes. It's wonderful. So if fans haven't seen it, go look at how Jodie Whittaker, as the Doctor, addresses the coronavirus and what we need to do as humans on the planet to help combat it and support one another. It's beautiful. But do we know about the Christmas episode or a future series in development? Do we know anything about progress on the show?
We know that Chibnall, in an interview about a couple months back, said that he specifically wants her to be the longest running doctor. And
love it.
specifically that is a personal goal of his. So we do know that. We know he said that.
Ever or of New Who?
I think he meant New Who because the context of the question was New Who.
Okay.
So, but he did say he just said that, just longest running like ever. So in the context of the question that was asked, it was new series. But I mean, who knows, right?
Right.
I mean, we know that Chibnall's a huge fan of the classic series and that he is bringing all these different things and tying up these loose ends and answering questions and bringing up even more questions as a result, you know, and that's the big linchpin of his cornerstone of his writing. So who knows?
I mean, I think he's kind of purposely moving away from the old stuff as much as he can and dropping that stuff as kind of like Easter eggs almost. And in many ways, he's kind of throwing stuff up against or at least it appears that he's throwing stuff up against the wall. But I know we get the Daleks at Christmas. At least two of the companions are probably gone in the sense that they're gone, but they can always come back because like Tosin, if the show doesn't work out, they can bring, you know, things like that. But I think what from what I understand, the erase stuff from the Matrix is going to be planned for the 60th. I mean, this whole arc is supposed to go into the 60th season. So I think the plan right now is to have Jodie around at least through the 60th anniversary.
Right.
And then I don't think the Master is, you know, going to be a short-term character. I think he's in for the long haul. And I think that I'm fine with him being the Master. And I think that they're really, you know, they haven't done a whole ton with Gallifrey as a core of the show. So I think you're going to see that. And I think you're going to see a lot more characters from that first season. You know, we still haven't seen a couple of those characters come back yet. So I think there's a couple little things we could see. I don't know. You can't really talk about the new season because I don't know what any of this does to their budget. I don't know what it does to the schedule. If they have to push the Olympics, like if the show comes back and the Olympics are on, I know the BBC front loads the Olympics, so that pushes it back. You know, I would not be surprised if we don't get a show from Christmas special to Christmas special. That would not surprise me.
Gotcha.
It's sad, but you know. But I love the fact that she is still making sure that everyone knows she is still the Doctor while this is going on. I love that. Yeah. And I love the fact that they're making sure that everyone still knows the show's alive and it's vibrant and they're doing stuff and everybody's out there and, you know, they're not backing down from their original plan, which I really love because if you're going to go, you know, it would have been very easy after season 1 to cut and run. It's like, okay, this didn't work. Let's get, you know, call a male actor. And I would have been more disappointed had they done that than I would have probably been with anything else. And I love the fact that they have a game plan and they're sticking with it. I don't know what it is. It sounds completely bonkers at this point, but that's okay. I'll ride it out.
It's a bonkers show.
I know.
Right. Right. And we do know, right, for example, that the Doctor Who experience in London is going to be made live, which is a fully immersive experience. That's 2021, and that's been like fully confirmed. But we don't know. We do know that's called Time Fracture. We do know that if you can check it out on YouTube, they actually have released some of the interactive like video clips that they're embedding into the experience. So those are live. And from what I understand, that Jodie has filmed some things for that. So we do know that is something that's coming out and something that's going to be out there. But you had one more thing that you were gonna mention before we head out of here.
Yeah, just there's a title listed on Wikipedia for the next episode, but of course no premiere date, and that title is Revolution of the Daleks.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. We're still figuring out what's going to happen moving forward with the next series of Doctor Who and pondering, and we're really excited that we have it, that it's here. It's been around for 57 years, and that we've have these wonderful, wonderful women who've been involved from the top down and now in the role of the doctor. And thank you so much for being here with us and chatting today about the women in Doctor Who and their influence. If you're still interested in this kind of topic, we're going to have panels throughout the weekend for the Doctor Who goes virtual.
Right.
Dragon Con goes virtual weekend. So we'll have lots of other Doctor Who programming that you need to check out. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, as well as Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend. Bye, Dragon Con. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.